An absolutely humiliating weekend for Democrats, mostly Tim Walz dressed up like Elmer Fudd, unable to load his $2,000 shotgun. We're going to break that down for you and show you all the ugly, hilarious details. Also, JD Vance humiliates a bunch of Democrats posing as journalists, and it was glorious to see. And there's a reason why, with those two stories bubbling up from the running mates in this presidential campaign, the polls are beginning to look absolutely devastating, like pull the emergency cord devastating for Democrats. We are 3 weeks away from the election, and things couldn't look worse for Kamala Harris. Actually, they could look worse, and they're about to. We're going to break it all down for you right now on this Columbus Day. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Indigenous Peoples Day. A great man, a great explorer, convinced the Queen of Spain to give him 3 ships, and he sailed across the Atlantic. And he set up the new world, and he's Christopher Columbus, damn it, and he deserves some credit. And yeah, some of the people that were here before he got here, they were doing, the Aztecs were sacrificing human beings until they got converted to Christianity. I had other stuff that went on too. I don't know. I didn't go to school. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. Appreciate you joining us today. It's going to be a great show, and I want to get right to it. JD Vance, Senator from Ohio, is the running mate for Donald Trump. And unlike Tim Walz, unlike Kamala Harris, he's actually granting interviews across the board. Hostile media, friendly media, press conferences, sit-downs, whatever you want. And he found himself sitting across from a New York Times podcaster who was challenging a basic premise about deporting illegal immigrants in this country because, well, think of the fallout. Think about how deporting illegal immigrants was going to affect the economy, right? There's no argument here about whether people should be here legally or illegally or not. There's no comment here about whether they've broken the law, these illegal immigrants. No, the argument is you shouldn't enforce the law and actually do what the law dictates, which is deporting those in the country illegally, because it will affect our economy. Watch how this goes for her.
The reason that there is a housing crisis is that not enough houses have been built.
And that we have 25 million people who shouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, this is the thing.
I think it's both.
I know you do. I don't think that many people who look into this agree with you, but about a third of the construction workforce in this country is Hispanic. Of those, a large proportion are undocumented. So how do you propose to build all the housing necessary that we need in this country by removing all the people who are working in construction?
This is a fascinating argument, which, by the way, I'm thrilled this intellectual, and she's intellectual because she's wearing glasses. This intellectual over at the New York Times is engaged in because it's actually honest. It's frank. It's real. It's actually what Democrats think. How can you possibly deport all of these people who are working in construction? By the way, how are they working in construction? They're not supposed to legally be working here. Right. So they're continuing to break the law. They always say, just because you're in the country illegally, that doesn't mean you're a lawbreaker. No, they're continuing to break the law because they're making money, earning money. When you go get a job and you have to show a passport or driver's license, birth certificates to fill out your I-9 form, they're falsely filling out an I-9 form and they've got fake documentation. Oh, there's another law they've broken. They've acquired fake and phony identification. Could actually be tantamount to identity theft. That would be another law that they're breaking, but it's fine. Never worry about that. The argument here is, how can you deport them all? Because we need them to we need them to build all of the housing that you want to construct here, JD Vance and Donald Trump, because we've got a housing crisis in this country. Now, first of all, that's not why we have a quote unquote housing crisis in this country, but take her argument for a minute. We need someone to build these homes, and these illegal immigrants are working in construction. So if you get rid of them, who's going to build the houses? That's literally what these elitist liberals think. That's in their little world. That's how they encapsulate this. They're basically arguing, hey, we need all of this low-paid slave labor that we've imported illegally from other countries. We need these people from other nations to build this stuff. So what's the problem? And they don't even see it because of the bubble they're living in. JD Vance sees it, and he pops that bubble.
Well, I think it's a fair question because we know that back in the 1960s, when we had very low levels of illegal immigration, Americans didn't buy houses, didn't build houses, but of course they did. and I'm being sarcastic, of course, in service of a point, Lulu, the assumption that because a large number of home builders now are using undocumented labor, that that's the only way to build homes, I think again
The country is
betrays
much
a
bigger. The
fundamental.
need is much bigger. I mean, I'm not arguing in favor of illegal immigration. I'm asking how you would deal with the knock-on effect of your proposal to remove millions of people who work in a critical part of the economy.
But of course, she is arguing for illegal immigration because she's specifically saying that we need these illegal immigrants to be here to build these homes. And of course, the assumption is that if they go away, houses won't be built. There would be no possible way to build houses anymore if illegal immigrants, undocumented people from foreign countries who are undermining the labor force in this country and the market and the wages for that labor force weren't here to do that. That's 100% an argument on behalf of illegal immigration. And even more so, it's an argument on behalf of the very few, very wealthy real estate developers, commercial real estate and private home residence real estate developers that the New York Times, is carrying water for right now, and their illegal behavior in hiring illegal immigrants. That's who the Democrats have become. That's who the liberals have become now. Listen, I'm all for free trade. I'm all for, the idea of a complete and total free market working within our country. The problem is we have a welfare state that subsidizes and entices people to come here illegally. That's not a free market concept. If you got rid of the welfare state, got rid of all the goodies, got rid of all the handouts, and had a very real free market where everybody's competing for labor and for jobs on an equal footing, you didn't have these regulations set up where if you hire someone who's a citizen who has a Social Security card who actually is here in the country legally, well, then you have to pay him this kind of wage and you have to pay him these kind of benefits and you have to take care of them in this kind of level as an employee because we've set up laws at the state and federal level to ensure that someone who's a citizen in this country gets those kind of labor protections. But if you hire somebody undocumented in this country and who's here illegal and you can pay him under the table, well, you can undermine all of that law. That's not a free market. And suddenly you've got a very lopsided world, and that's the world that this woman from the New York Times and the New York Times by extension is advocating for. Let's keep undermining legal employment and the legal means of building houses and buildings in this country, subsidizing it and subsidizing all those rich, wealthy developers with illegal labor that access. Listen, Democrats are the party of slavery. So, it's kind of hard for them to shake that habit. It's just slavery under a different name. Let's get back to JD here.
Well, I think that what you would do is you would take, let's say, for example, the 7 million prime age men who have dropped out of the labor force, and you have a smaller number of women, but still millions of women prime age who have dropped out of the labor force. You absolutely could re-engage folks into the American labor market. This is, I think,
To work in construction?
Of course you could.
The unemployment rate is 4.1%. Most people
unemployment rate, Lulu, this is important.
But most people who don't work can't work in the regular economy. They're in the military, they're parents, they're sick, they're old. They might not want to work in construction.
All right, so this is a perfect example. If you saw what just happened here, is that first of all, she was shocked. What? You're telling me that people will work in construction? We American citizens don't do that sort of thing. White people won't do that sort of thing. That's for the brown and black people that we import here so that they can work for pennies on the dollar. But also, did you see that she immediately pulled up notes that she is reading from her laptop, reading talking points, and she doesn't even listen to JD Vance counter. Understand, JD Vance just said 7 million prime age men in this country. That's 7 million people of prime working age who, yes, could work construction, could benefit from working construction, and by the way, could provide for their families by having such a testosterone-filled great job out in the outdoors, swinging a hammer and constructing homes. They have been removed. They have removed themselves from the job market because there's nothing satisfying for them. And they're ready, willing, and able to get back into the job market. But if they try to get a construction job, they're told to go away. And she just talked right over that and started talking about the unemployment rate, which has nothing to do with people who aren't in the job market. Watch her look at her notes as soon as she tries to make this claim.
Of course you could.
Look, right there.
The unemployment rate is 4.1%. Most people
unemployment rate, Lulu, this is important.
But most people who don't work can't work in the regular economy. They're in the military, they're parents, they're sick, they're old. They might not want to work in construction.
They have convinced themselves that these are jobs that real Americans won't really do. So that's why we need to import people from them. She quotes a 4.1% unemployment rate, but that doesn't include people who have actually removed themselves from the economy, that are driving Uber or Uber Eats or something like that because they couldn't get a regular job. And so they're working outside of the confines of the regular employment world. The unemployment rate only measures people who were in work, have lost their job, and now are trying to find a job again, a W-2 job, a regular job that you have to, prove your citizenship to have. So she parrots all of those talking points from the left, and now JD Vance is ready. He pounces.
Unemployment rate does not count labor force participation dropouts. And again, this is one of the really deranged things that I think illegal immigration does to our society, is it gets us in a mindset of saying we can only build houses with illegal immigrants when we have 7 million, just men, not even women, just men who have completely dropped out of the labor force. People say, well, Americans won't do those jobs. Americans won't do those jobs for below the table wages. They won't do those jobs for non-living wages. But people will do those jobs. They will just do those jobs at certain wages. And think about this perspective of an American company, okay? I want them to go searching in their own country for their own citizens. Sometimes people who may be struggling with addiction or trauma, get them re-engaged in American society. We cannot have an entire American business community that is giving up on American workers and then importing millions of illegal laborers. That is what we have thanks to Kamala Harris's border policies. I think it's one of the biggest drivers of inequality. It's one of the biggest reasons why we have millions of people who have dropped out of the labor force. Why try to re-engage an American citizen in a good job if you can just import somebody from Central America who's going to work under the table for poverty wages? It is a disgrace, and it has led to the evisceration of the American middle class.
And it led to the evisceration of that New York Times podcaster, because that was ugly. And there's a cleanup on aisle 3 right now that's waiting because she is just left in a heaping pile of rubble. That was amazing. And understand where the lines are drawn now. And you may not be used to this. I know it's disorienting. We've gone a long way from the Laffer curve and Jack Kemp and free markets and free trade and no tariffs. And as long as we can construct things that are cheap, that ends up helping everyone in this country. No, there has been a bit of a shift here. And you've got Democrats, liberal elites, Ivy League college educated Democrats represented by this woman at the New York Times, advocating for exploiting cheap labor for the benefit of keeping housing down. But that ends up, as JD Vance just pointed out, sending millions of American citizens who normally would be laborers in that field out into devastating lives now. They may be suffering from addiction now. Because they feel shiftless. They feel like they don't have a future. They don't have the ability to actually do a job and get a good, honest pay and raise their families. And now Republicans, personified in JD Vance and Donald Trump, are the ones who are championing their cause. Yes, even if that means that housing developers and commercial real estate developers are going to have to pay more for their labor. That's better for our country, better for our citizens. And by the way, you'll end up getting better quality work in your construction jobs instead of exploiting imported illegal labor in this country. I don't know about you, and I don't know what side is going to end up winning, but I think that those who are interested in engaging American citizens with these kind of jobs rather than exploiting people from other countries with cheap under the table jobs as illegal laborers in this country, I think those people are on the side of the angels. And the people who are interested in exploiting people of other colors and other races from other countries so that they can keep their housing costs low, I don't think they're on the side of the angels. You tell me what side they're on. And this extrapolates well beyond just this. That includes restaurant workers. It includes gardeners. It includes, all the people who do the dirty jobs that woman from the New York Times can imagine any rational American ever wanting to do. Cleaning toilets, cleaning out hotel rooms, being janitors, when we were all younger, those jobs were not taken by people from other countries who don't speak our language and come here illegally. They were done by people in the working class here in America. And she can't fathom it. She can't fathom that these jobs were once taken by other people. It's a remarkable moment, actually, in the political zeitgeist of America. And here we are 3 weeks away from the election, and JD Vance just laid it out there perfectly. By the way, can you imagine a Democrat politician sitting opposite the equal of the New York Times and engaging in this kind of interview and sparring over economic issues in such a way when she has notes, he does not? But here's what's remarkable. That wasn't even JD Vance's greatest moment this weekend. Let's turn to ABC News. ABC News, Martha Raddatz. ABC News, Martha Raddatz tried to make a big deal out of Donald Trump saying at his rallies that apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado had been taken over by Venezuelan gangs. And that's the truth. Apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado had been taken over by Venezuelan gangs. These gangs took over the buildings and started collecting rent from the people who lived in those buildings. And the building owner couldn't do anything about it. So she attacks JD Vance because Donald Trump has said this. And watch how she frames this out. This is amazing.
Understand what you're saying, that some people left behind, but he's making these statements that the mayor is flat out disputing.
Well, Martha, you just said the mayor said they were exaggerated.
Grossly exaggerated.
That means there's got to be some element of truth here. And of course, President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay, let's just end that with they did not invade or take over the city, as Donald Trump said. I want to move on to
just a few apartment complexes, no big deal.
A few apartment complexes that the mayor did not seem was invading the entire city. Let's move on to women and abortion.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you to Newsbusters there for the video clip, as always. So think this through for a minute here. First of all, I do love the part where she says, Mr. Vance, Senator Vance, let me just jump in here because I know exactly what happened. And then she goes to read a statement from the mayor. So she doesn't know exactly what happened. She knows what the mayor of Aurora has told her to say. Okay, number one. But number two, that moment, it was just a handful of apartment complexes that were taken over by Venezuelan gangs. And apartment complexes, by the way, how many hundreds of units are in an apartment complex? How many hundreds or thousands of Americans were intimidated and bullied and terrorized by murderous Venezuelan gangs? And Martha Raddatz is fine with that. Back of her hand, she dismisses it. A handful of apartment complexes. It's just a handful of apartment complexes. By the way, not for nothing, this is Martha Raddatz's home in Alexandria, Virginia. It was bought in 2016. It's valued at over $2 million. I mean, something tells me that if her home were taken over by a Venezuelan gang and she had to pay rent to them, or if she was kicked out of the home so that the Venezuelan gang should take over, I think that she would be bothered by that. Don't you think? Or if her child was living in that apartment complex that has now been taken over by a Venezuelan gang, or her mother, or anyone that she actually knows or cares about. And of course, it's not anyone she knows or cares about. It's just some random American citizen there in flyover country that had to deal with it. Or for that matter, the owner of that building. You know, the person who actually owns the property that has been stolen and absconded by Venezuelan gangs. But, you know, Martha Raddatz, it's just a handful of apartment complexes. I'm curious, Martha, Clearly, you're not concerned about a handful of apartment complexes, but that does suggest that if it reached a certain number of apartment complexes, then you would be concerned. Then you would say this is a valid argument to make. So what is that threshold? Is it 10 apartment complexes? Is it 15 apartment complexes? It's really just a negotiation at this point in terms of how many apartment complexes would be taken over by murderous Venezuelan gangs before you actually decide, yes, okay, this is a legitimate issue. Also, one other thing about this, Martha Raddatz, you've, of course, conceded now on your Sunday news show that this did happen, even though the governor of Colorado denied that this had happened at all until the next day when he couldn't deny it because the truth was out there. You've acknowledged that this happened, Martha Raddatz. I'm curious, how many segments did you do on ABC News about this issue? Did it show up on the evening news? Did it show up on Good Morning America? Did you do any segments on this week? Has ABC News covered this story at all? American citizens displaced and terrorized by murderous Venezuelan gangs in the middle of our country in Aurora, Colorado. Multiple buildings taken over, and the owner of those buildings completely basically robbed of his property and bullied and intimidated by these people. Did you cover that at all? In fact, isn't it true that the only reason you're covering this is because Donald Trump mentioned it at a rally in a way that you didn't like? He used words describing this in a way that you found offensive. And so you're not really covering it now, are you? You're covering the words Donald Trump used to describe it. And that's really all you want to talk about. This is the state of American journalism right now. And one other thing about this issue in Colorado, the building owner, CBZ Management, they took to social media. They took to X on Saturday, and they laid out the truth about it. Gangs have taken control of several of our properties in Aurora, Colorado. In an attempt to discredit this fact for political purposes and avoid governmental accountability, some have spread false information about our situation. By the way, that's Martha Raddatz, and that's the mayor of Aurora. But here's a synopsis of what actually happened.
See if you can find that story on the Venezuelan gangs taking over the apartment building in Colorado.
We have new information on what we've learned is happening inside an apartment complex. This video shows armed men walking through a building, knocking on doors, and entering an apartment. The apartment complex is at 12th and Dallas and Aurora.
In doing so, have taken over several apartment complexes.
Venezuelan gangs are taking over the real estate. They're becoming real estate developers. And they have...
Do they get little cards?
Their little card is a bullet.
Yes. Kamala Harris will work to deliver on that and secure the border.
Who's to blame? Carousel, if you will, continues. The city says the property management team is simply not doing enough to help these residents. And an interview with that property management team last week, they say that that building is actually being controlled by a certain gang, and they feel helpless. There's nothing they can do about it.
They've, in fact, have kind of pushed out the property management through intimidation and then collected the rents. And arrests have been made, but these operations are still ongoing.
That's right. And you heard right
See if
there
you can
that
find that story.
they were blaming the property managers. The property manager is this, CBZ Management. We started managing these buildings when new owners acquired the Colorado properties in 2019. At the time, the properties were in poor condition. Our mission was to renovate them, thereby increasing their value. It was an ambitious project. We also undertook a complete renovation of nearly every unit in the now well-known building you've seen in the news. Everything was progressing smoothly, property values were rising, and vacancy rates were dropping. It was win-win for both the owners and the city of Aurora. Then the gangs arrived. After some time, we noticed a rise in crime and tenant complaints. The most alarming moment occurred when our local CBZ representative was attacked at the end of 2023. He had gone to inspect a recently vacated 3-bedroom apartment, and he was met with gangs of squatters. There's the representative of the property management. This was in 2023. He was beaten up to a pulp. After the attack on our CBZ representative, we began getting threatening text messages. We frequently found people illegally occupying newly vacated apartments during scheduled tours. It was initially attributed to an influx of migrants exploiting squatter laws. We even received a call from a tenant returning from vacation only to find strangers living in his apartment. This legitimate tenant was forced to find a new home after police couldn't help him. When confronted, many of these illegal tenants and squatters claimed they had already paid rent, which we soon realized was true, but not to us. They were paying rent to a different entity. Gangs gangs who took over and started collecting rent. And then this is how local news covered it at the beginning.
As far as what happens next, the city says unless the property owners remedy every single documented violation, the city will designate the building as unsafe due to its condition, not because of gangs.
That's right. The city claimed that the building owners and the property managers were in violation of city codes. But of course, it was because they couldn't go and do anything in the building because it had been taken over by gangs. Finally, one councilwoman, Danny Jurinsky, decided to take action after one of our last remaining legitimate tenants, Cindy Romero, reached out to her in desperation. Cindy had her own cameras. Most of ours had been destroyed by the gangs, and she provided video proof. This is when everything changed in Aurora about this story.
There have been rumblings of new gang activity in Aurora all summer. Officials have skated around the topic, but now there's video and victims they can't deny.
It's really like being held hostage.
Cindy was a prisoner in her own home. She's lived in this building at 12th and Dallas for years. This summer, when crime got worse, Cindy got cameras.
And that woman, Cindy Romero, this weekend showed up on stage next to Donald Trump in Colorado at a rally. She told her story. Nobody believed her until she actually brought the video cameras. The city government didn't believe her. The media didn't believe her. But now they do. Cindy Romero, appearing with Donald Trump at the rally, told her story again, confirmed that these Venezuelan gangs coming here illegally because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's border policies had taken over and terrorized those buildings, continue to do so. And at the end of her remarks, she said to the crowd of Trump supporters, "Thank you for believing me." That's all she wanted, but nobody would believe her, because her story was damaging to Democrats. Her story was damaging to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Even worse, it helped Donald Trump make his case. The management company in Colorado finished with this. Despite clear evidence, many still deny the reality of the situation, sometimes using us as scapegoats. That's why we're no longer staying silent. We'll continue to counter falsehoods with simple facts and evidence. Yes, gangs did take control of our apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, and the government did nothing. That is the real story, which brings us back to ABC News and Martha Raddatz, who again interrupted JD Vance because she knew exactly what happened in Aurora, Colorado. Remember?
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes?
I think that may be my favorite part. JD Vance couldn't even believe it. Martha Raddatz, with a wave of her very well manicured liberal elite hand, living in her $2+ million home in Alexandria, Virginia, says it was only a handful of apartment complexes. And even JD Vance couldn't believe what he was hearing. Do you hear yourself, Martha? I don't think Martha does hear herself, but we hear her. We know exactly where the media stands right now, and we know exactly where JD Vance, Donald Trump, and the Republican ticket stands on very real problems facing very real Americans. Election day is 3 weeks from tomorrow. And you just saw every single reason to make up your mind today. With the massive tax hikes proposed by Kamala Harris and almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains, and her proposals could add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. You're probably a little worried about the economic realities should she win the election. You might be thinking it's time to take more of your savings and put them into a tax-sheltered and inflation-sheltered kind of account. That's where the people at Birch Gold Group can help you. Birch Gold will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And the best news is you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the word Larry to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just information on fortifying your savings before the crazy really hits. Got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers over there at Birch Gold, so you should trust them too. Text Larry to the number 989898. Get your free info kit today.
Hey, Larry, we got a super chat.
We got a super chat. Hot damn. Thank you, guys. What do we got there, Kevin? Oh, Dennis Harmon, $20. Thank you, man. And happy Columbus Day. That really means the most to us. Well, we appreciate that. And thank you for the kind words. We'd like to think we have a most excellent show, and we try to deliver every day for you. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Well, Tim Walz, as you know, faces a problem along with Kamala Harris, the top of the ticket. They face a problem with male voters. So on Friday, they made a very public show about rolling out a strategy into the weekend. First, he was going to sit down with an interview with Michael Strahan, you know, a former football player. So manly man stuff there. Of course, that was on Good Morning America, not on Fox NFL Sunday. So I don't know who they were appealing to with the Good Morning America audience. It's not the most masculine audience in the world. It's mostly women. That's okay. After that, they rolled out a huge photo op where he was going to go hunting for pheasant with all his hunting friends. And who among us doesn't go hunting with all our friends and a bunch of reporters and photographers so that they can capture everything? Because it's really not a hunting trip. It's a photo op. And even that, perfectly well staged and managed, was a complete disaster for Tim Walz. I mean, take a look at this manly man going out hunting. Just take a look.
A few moments ago, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was out pheasant hunting in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, taking part in the 12th annual Governor's Pheasant Hunting Opener. This comes, friends, as we know that they're going to have Walz doing sort of a blitz, reaching out to men, young men, voters they know, 50-50 swing vote. They know they need to get him.
Yes. Can I just say, Hope Walz is giving a pheasant hunting glam this morning. Okay. That is the governor's daughter that you see her in the back. Look at this. She's making pheasant hunting. Fetch is happening. She's making fetch happen.
A few moments ago, Minnesota Governor.
Pheasant hunting glam, fetch is happening. It's a woman wearing an oversized jacket and an orange hat, but whatever. First of all, you can see the creases in the shirt because he just unpacked it from his Eddie Bauer mail order. Number one. Number two, this is all the B-roll that they got, right, of the hunting trip. Do you notice something missing? Do you notice one element of a hunting trip that you don't see in any of these images that they put out there? Anyone? If you see what I see, if you're noticing some critical element usually employed in a hunting trip that you don't see in this picture, I'd love to hear you. Put it in the comments below. We'll see if you can notice exactly the thing that I'm noticing, because maybe it's me, but if you're going hunting pheasants, you need one more element. That not just the orange hat, not just the Eddie Bauer shirt, not just the dude with the cowboy hat. There's something else. So there is a Brokeback situation going on there, but there's something else missing. I think you know what I'm talking about. It's one of these. That's right. The guns, the pew-pews. That is correct. Thank you, chat. Thank you, live chat, for figuring it out. So someone finally handed Tim Walz his gun, and he says that this is his gun. He claims he bought this when he was shooting trap, he said. Now, you tell me, if you own a gun or if you know someone who owns a gun, you tell me if this looks like the behavior of somebody who is working with his own shotgun that he owns and uses on a regular basis, or for that matter, if you think this is the behavior or posture of someone who's in any way comfortable around a firearm. You tell me.
Governor, what kind of gun is it? This is a Beretta A400. I bought it when I was shooting a lot of trap, because it has a kind of their patented thing, a kickoff. So when you get old, it doesn't hurt your shoulder as much.
Okay, so he was asked what kind of gun it was. He said it was a Beretta A400, which I'm told costs base model about $2,200. So, I mean, bully for him. I can tell you that my wife Meredith saw this and was, as he was struggling to load it in this very awkward fashion, and she said, "Oh my God, this hurts my heart. Could I please have that shotgun? Could I promise I will take better care of that shotgun. I will pay more respect to that shotgun." My wife is the gun nut in the family. She's from Oklahoma. And listen, I am no gun expert, but I'm pretty sure if you're having trouble loading it, you don't want to brace the butt of your shotgun against your groin. That just doesn't seem like the normal operations, does it? He also said, I don't know if you heard it, that he bought this because he reached a certain age and the kickback on it doesn't hurt your shoulder as much. Go get those manly man voters there, Timmy. Doing a hell of a job. I mean, honestly, what in the hell were they thinking? They thought this was going to work. I mean, you look at this, you realize immediately what's going to happen. And of course, it did happen. Yeah, how can you blame anyone for doing this? It's like they were begging for it. Absolutely begging for it. How do you let this happen if you're running this campaign? I'm starting to think that there's sabotage within this campaign. I'm starting to think that there are some Biden loyalists who are a little pissed off about how things went down in July. And so they're like, oh, no, this is great. You look fabulous. It's wonderful. I don't know. I'm looking at myself in the mirror and it reminds me of someone. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I look familiar. Nah, you look great. You know what? You know who you look like? You look like Rambo. That's who you look like. Really? Because I don't want people to make memes about me and make fun of me and mock me. No chance. Timmy, you look great. Absolutely great. No one's going to make fun of you or make memes about you. Trust me.
It's not quite right. How do you get it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400. I bought it when I was shooting a lot of trap because it has a. It's not quite right. How do you get it back?
Yeah. Trust me, no memes will be made. You're doing honestly, the only meme will be a Rambo comparison. Maybe John Wick. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's John Wick or Rambo or both. But no one's going to make fun of you. You know, if you're sitting there with a bunch of, Gen Z women and Gen Z TikTok stars who are gender binary, and you're trying to figure out how to appeal to manly men, you're already a little bit behind the eight ball. And if this is the best you can come up with, the hunting trip and the interview with Michael Strahan, we want you to sit with a football player. Oh, how about that Michael Strahan? He really appeals to George Stephanopoulos' manly audience. You've already lost. Don't even try, right? And if we could just switch over to CNN here, because Scott Jennings, our fave over here on the Larry Town Hall Media Show, he sort of summed it up right. I'm going to let him sort of button it up for you, and I'll expand on it a little bit.
It was a rough week. I mean, her faves are down. They're struggling with, the front page of the New York Times this morning, Democrats struggling with African-American voters, particularly African-American men. This gender gap issue is real. It's a real problem. And you see the Democrats reacting to it. And I think what they are now finally in October, the election, coming to realize is that a lot of men think Democrats care more about dudes who want to become women than dudes who just want to be dudes. And no hunting, cosplay, or cringy videos is going to change it. The bet is made. Working class men, whether you're black, Hispanic, or white, persistently, consistently do not believe the Democratic Party, and specifically Kamala Harris, are going to do a thing for them. They've been told that they're the problem, and I suspect they're going to rise up on election day and tell the elites who told them that you're wrong.
Yeah, really well said. And let me just button that up a little bit, because I loved how the CNN panel erupts with indignation when he said that the only men that the Democrats seem to really speak out for and try to champion are the men who actually want to be women. And they're all like freaking out. Let me just say, as a man and as a father of sons and daughters, don't spend the last 2 decades demonizing me as being toxic in my masculinity, demonizing white men in particular as the problem of all of society's ills, that we are the reason why anything is bad in this country. And at the same time, tell me that the only men that deserve praise or elevation and in some way, some level of virtue that you bestow upon them, that the only men that gets that virtue and praise and elevation are the men who stand up for the rights of their daughters to kill their own grandchildren before they're born, or the men who invade my daughter's locker room and pretend to be a woman and put her in danger. Because that's all we've heard. And then don't get a little indignant when we decide, you know what, I'm not going to keep voting for you because you've told me you don't want my vote. In fact, you've told me you don't even want my participation in society. You bet your ass Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and the Democrats across the board have a major gender gap problem with male voters. And it's because you've told us you don't want us and you don't need us. In fact, you've told us we are the enemy. So don't act indignant and shocked and surprised when suddenly we don't go along and do what you tell us to do. More from this CNN panel.
She had a terrible week. It was a terrible week for the Harris this campaign. You had Gretchen Whitmer having to apologize to the Catholics across America for mocking them with some bizarro Dorito thing on there. You had Governor Elmer Fudd out hunting and not knowing how to load his shotgun, using the wrong gun. At the same time,
Who's Governor Elmer Fudd?
Governor Walz was out there. Looked like Elmer Fudd. You know, be very, very quiet while hunting for rabbits.
Oh my God.
Right? So he can't load his shotgun. He's trying to appeal to hunters. He can't load the gun. He's using the wrong gun. At the same time, you have Barack Obama in Pennsylvania where he derided people who own guns. Remember, people in Pennsylvania were bitter and they clinged to guns and religion. Remember that in 2008? So they're trying to appeal to those folks at the same time while he alienates black male voters by chastising. So they had a really tough week this week. She had a terrible week. It was a terrible week.
Yeah, that was David Urban, of course, one of our other great favorites over there at CNN. And I'm glad that CNN continues to let them be on the panel. In fact, this was a unicorn moment where both he and Scott Jennings were on the panel at the same time. So it was really 3-2, which is just completely not fair. I love Dana Bash not understanding what he's talking about when he says Governor Elmer Fudd. It tells you how clued into the news cycle and the American zeitgeist she is, or any of these journalists are for that matter. Yeah, it was a really, 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 really bad week for the Harris and Walz campaign. And in a minute, you're going to see exactly how that's reflected in the polls. It's bad. In fact, it's super duper ugly. All right. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Angela, for the $1.99. That is very much appreciated. Again, we don't ask for any of these super chats, but we are so welcome to. We are so grateful for them, and we thank you. If anyone else wants to help us out, listen, super chats are always welcome, and that's fantastic, and it certainly goes to our operations here. But honestly, just a like and a subscribe, a referral, a comment, forwarding our link, posting it wherever you dwell, whether it's on other social media platforms, your Facebook page, Reddit, I don't know where you are, but wherever it is, we'd love for our link to be there. That matters a lot to us. Thank you so much. So apparently JD Vance is in trouble because he wouldn't parrot the talking point the journalists forced him to say, which is that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Why are they so obsessed with the 2020 election? They're more obsessed than Donald Trump is, to tell you the truth. You know, listen, if Donald Trump in his heart of hearts believes that that election was conducted in an illegal fashion, and I got to say there's a lot of evidence that extraordinary rules were broken and changed and modified at the last minute for the pandemic there in certain states that really did tell the outcome, then of course he's going to think that that election, you know, is going to stick in the back of his head as a problem. The fact that they're forcing JD Vance, that they want to demonize him if he doesn't parrot exactly what, you know, Jake Tapper demands that he says about the 2020 election is such a non-issue. The American people don't care about it. And the only way to deal with this is the way Ryan Girdusky dealt with it on CNN. Take a look at Ryan. He just absolutely hammers this home.
Ryan, what's your thought?
This is just ridiculous because I'm sorry, Stacey Abrams never accepted the results of her 2018 election. Hillary Clinton said Russia stole the 2016 election. Democrats denied the 2000 elections. Democrats denied the 2004 elections. Every election Democrats don't win. They kick and stamp their feet. They sit there and they say it's stolen. They say we need to pack the Supreme Court, make Puerto Rico and DC a state, make sure that Other voters are disenfranchised. Give citizenship to illegal aliens, making sure Americans' votes counts for less. They don't listen. If you're going to care, I care about democracy. I care about democracy.
You don't care much.
I care about keeping it. Yeah, I do clearly because I support Stacey Abrams.
Hold on a second.
Ryan, they don't march in DC, Ryan. Like, that's the difference, right? Like, you're pointing to, I agree with you. Hillary Clinton said that. Stacey Abrams said that. You know what they didn't do? They didn't organize a rally. They didn't tweet about it. Peter Navarro didn't tweet about it. They didn't have all of these other subsidiary people organize an event. Like, look, this is not rocket science. It happened. The revolution was televised. We all saw it that day of what happened. Like, I agree with you that the American people want to move on from that. But if you can't acknowledge that it happened, how can we move on from something? If you can't meet me in the middle of the sky and the sun is yellow, how are we supposed to have a conversation?
I completely agree with you. January 6th was horrible and it was disgusting. Nonetheless, and yet still, if you care about the institution of democracy, Democrats have been disenfranchising it for 20 years since the Bush election.
That's a complete lie.
They said Ohio was stolen in 04.
When you get finished with your
hold
talking
on,
point,
don't talk over each other. Van, finish your point.
Yeah, they're not talking over each other. Van Jones is talking over him, and that's when you know they don't like what you're saying when you're telling the truth. But of course, we do know that ever since the George Bush election in 2000, they have been undermining the electoral process at any chance they get. That's why they keep saying, let's do away with the Electoral College, right? And you don't think that doesn't undermine our process? It undermines our Constitution? It does on a regular basis. So, of course, Van Jones has to talk over him and interrupt him.
But you're letting him ramble on with these talking points that you could pull out of a Cracker Jack box. Listen.
Pull out of a Cracker Jack box. Okay, Van. Listen, they are in trouble. They are desperate. And let me explain to you why you're starting to see this conversation about January 6th all over again. And by the way, real fast, this whole, he started a revolution and it was televised and Donald Trump led the insurrection. Anytime you're hearing that from your friends or if they're saying it on your Facebook page or whatever, just say, hey, you've got this prosecutor, this special prosecutor with an unlimited budget. His name is Jack Smith, and he's been investigating this for like almost 2 years now, right? And there's been tons of investigators and tons of arrests. Can you please tell me, of the 1,000 people who were arrested for January 6th and the investigation into Donald Trump, please tell me, friend, how many of them have been arrested and charged with insurrection? In fact, specifically Donald Trump, you've got the special prosecutor with an unlimited budget and he's able to subpoena and look into anything. He's brought charges against Donald Trump. Did he bring insurrection charges? Of course, the answer is zero. None. Not a one of them. Not one of the 1,000 people who were arrested for January 6th and Donald Trump. None of them have actually been charged with insurrection. Do you know why? Because there wasn't an insurrection. And everybody knows it, except for these idiots. Except for these idiots and the Democrats who are continuing to try to divide us and throw gasoline on this fire because it was their fate. They keep saying, oh, it was such an awful day. No, they loved January 6th. It was the greatest day in the world for them because they didn't have to have the conversation about what happened in Pennsylvania when the unelected Secretary of State upended what the state legislature had determined on the proper handling of mail-in and absentee ballots. They loved the fact that they never had to confront that and discuss what happened in that election. Did Joe Biden win the 2020 election? Well, under the guise of the rules that were laid out and the procedures that were determined for the 2020 election, yes, Joe Biden was definitely declared the winner. And that's as far as I'll say about what happened on Election Day in 2020. Hopefully you can read between those lines to see exactly what did happen. And don't forget one other thing. One of the biggest concerns and biggest issues and biggest challenges the Trump team had with regard to the 2020 election was the handling, verification, and counting of absentee ballots. We had more absentee ballots in 2020 than we had ever had in our history. And why? Because of the pandemic. Why did we have all of those absentee ballots? Because of the pandemic? Because it was determined that social distancing rules precluded people from going and standing in line and voting like they normally would. And where did those social distancing rules come from? According to Anthony Fauci, he has no idea. They just showed up one day. Who determined that we had to be separated by 6 feet to protect ourselves for the pandemic? Anthony Fauci has no idea. No idea the origin of that. The single rule that forced all those absentee ballots that are so in question from the 2020 election, that rule materialized out of nowhere. These are facts. Look it up. But yeah, absolutely. Based on all of those conditions, based on the rules that were laid forth and how they were determined in certain states, yep, Joe Biden was declared the winner. All right, so why are they focused on this so much? Why is January 6th such a major thing for them? Because they're in big, big trouble. Super duper big, big trouble. Take a look.
All right, so party ID nationally. You go to October, November of 2016, Democrats had a 3-point advantage. You go 4 years ago, Democrats had a 6-point advantage. Look at where we are today, Manu. Republicans with a 1-point advantage. A very different picture, very much mirroring what we see in the party registration numbers in those key battleground states and Pennsylvania in particular.
It actually just shows you too why Harris is doing what she's trying to do. She's trying to moderate a little bit on these issues, trying to reach those very voters because the party registration is changing and the demographics of the voters are changing. Those are the people she needs to attract.
Absolutely. And you know, the GOP leads by a point in party identification right now. The average when the Republican Party loses is the Democrats ahead by 8. When the Republican Party wins, the average party ID advantage for Democrats is 3. Republicans right now, Manu, are doing even better than the average when they win. If there's one little nugget that I think Republicans are really hopeful for, it's this party ID and this party registration data. It really points in a good direction for them and for Donald Trump.
All right, couple things here. First of all, I hope you see the sub-headline there. GOP leads 1 point in party identification. A rare GOP edge in presidential elections since 1984. Republicans have not led nationally in party identification in polls since 1984, which, by the way, Ronald Reagan won that election 49 states to 1. It was the biggest landslide since 1972, with Richard Nixon winning every state except for Massachusetts. That's huge, right? And this whole idea where the anchor here on CNN says, well, that explains why Kamala Harris is trying to appeal to Republicans because she wants to. Let me tell you something. If over the last 4 years you've gone from Democrat to Republican, you're not inclined to vote for Kamala Harris as a registered Republican. You left the Democrat Party because of what Kamala Harris has been doing. So that strategy ain't going to work. Also, very, very important. A lot of these Republicans, the new registrations, right? You've never registered to vote before, so now you're registering as a Republican, and that's moving these numbers up. Those Republicans do not show up in the polls. The polls of likely voters, they determine who a likely voter is based on asking a few questions. Did you vote in the primaries? Did you vote in the last election? Did you vote in the election before that? Based on that criteria, they determine whether you're a likely voter or not. If you're a newly registered voter and you've never voted in a presidential election, the pollster's going to hang up on you because they're only looking for likely voters. And based on the way they determine who a likely voter is, if you're a new registry, you're not a likely voter because you've never voted before. So all of those brand new registered Republican are not showing up in any of your polls. That said, Gallup, who has done this new party identification poll, Gallup has determined that now, for the first time since 1984, majority of Americans identify as Republican over Democrat. They have now extrapolated that to the battleground states. And what you're about to see is extraordinary. If you extrapolate that party identification number to where we are in the battleground states and the Electoral College map, that's what election night looks like. With that swing of Republican voters. That's an absolute blowout. Take a look. You've got Minnesota going Republican. You've got Nevada going Republican. You've got New Hampshire going Republican. You've got Maine going Republican. If that party ID then gets extrapolated into how people vote in those very, very close states. Look at how the numbers break down. You get Maine by just 1%, New Hampshire 1.4%, Minnesota 1%. But some of these battleground states, look at this. Wisconsin 7.5 points, Arizona 7 points, Pennsylvania 6 points. That's too big to rig, my friends. And that's why they're panicked. Every single data point that's coming through right now in the polls, and especially understand that these polls notoriously underrepresent Republicans, especially Trump voters. It's so ugly for them right now. And there's more.
And sometimes there's a trend line that I never noticed before and make me go, whoa. This is one of them, all right? This is the Democratic margin among black men under the age of 45 in presidential elections. You go back to November of 2012, what do you see? You see Obama by 81. Clinton only won him by 63. Then we're all the way down to Biden last time around by 53. A tremendous drop already. And then you take a look at the average of the most recent polls, and Kamala Harris is up by only 41 points. That is about half the margin that Obama won them by back in November of 2012. And this, I think, is, you know, when Barack Obama goes in last week when he was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, essentially talking to young black men, he made it seem like it was a Kamala Harris specific problem. This is part of a long-standing trend of young black men moving away from the Democratic Party, and Kamala Harris is just the latest to face that magnitude of younger black men going towards the Republicans.
That was most interesting here is the trend line and where some of the biggest drops happen or already happen. And
That's right. The trend line is important there as you see it. Also, listen, is this election going to be determined by black men between the ages of 18 and 44? Well, maybe, maybe not. I can tell you that some of the higher population centers that represent black men 18 to 44 are places like Detroit in the state of Michigan, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in the state of Pennsylvania, Atlanta in the state of Georgia. Those states sound familiar to you? This is why you saw Barack Obama mobilize last week to try to juice up this vote among black men. Of course, the way he did it is not going to help because he started lecturing them and calling them sexist for not voting for her, which is kind of funny because they voted for Hillary. So what is it about Kamala Harris? Maybe they're finally starting to see that the policies are harming them. Maybe. But there's more here. More trouble for Democrats. Good stuff.
in this case, how about black men overall?
How about black men overall? It's part of the same picture. You know, we're looking once again at younger black men. It looks like the worst Democratic performance since 1960, since JFK versus Richard Nixon. It's the same thing among black men overall. Again, part of a similar trend, but here actually the drop-off isn't as dramatic, right? Barack Obama won him by 85. Then you see 71 with Clinton, 69. Biden, basically the same thing, holding steady. But here, again, very, very weak. Only a 54-point margin. Now, again, still winning them by a large margin, but considerably lower than what we're used to. Certainly considerably lower what we had during the Obama years. The bottom line is Kamala Harris with younger black men and then black men overall putting in historically weak performance for a Democratic
Is she
candidate.
getting any relief with black women?
All right. So, you know, we're talking about the trend line, right? And black women, look, she's doing better with black women than she is doing among black men. But here, there isn't a trend line almost until we get to Kamala Harris. So again, this is a black margin among black women. Look, Obama won him by 93, very large margin. Clinton won him by 93, a very large margin. Biden did a little bit worse at 85. But then you look here, and you get a 71-point margin. Now, again, these are large margins, but the bottom line is when you're talking about the base of the Democratic Party, you would think that Kamala Harris would do very well among black women based upon history. And of course, she would be the first black woman president, but she's actually doing the worst for a Democratic candidate among black women since 1960, if this holds, John.
And again, when you look at the numbers here, whenever you come in, looking at the trends is probably the most important thing.
You got it, my friend.
Thank you very much.
The worst performance among black voters, men and women, since 1960. And by the way, there's another way of phrasing that, which they'll never bring themselves to say, but I'll say it for you. Donald Trump is poised to have the greatest performance of any politician, any Republican politician since 1960 for black men and black women. See, that's really the story here. I know they want to talk about what a terrible candidate she is, and I love talking about what a terrible candidate she is because she's a terrible candidate. And this is what they get for the coup that they engineered. They never went through a primary process. They never went through a vetting process. So they deserve to have a lousy candidate, and she deserves to lose horribly. But the real message here is after nearly 10 years of telling African-American voters that Donald Trump was racist, that he was a Klansman, that he was Hitler, that he hates black people, that he's going to do whatever he can to resegregate and institute, horrific hate crimes against black people after Charlottesville, after saying that he supports the Klan and white nationalists and the Confederacy and all of these things, after that relentless line of attack, Donald J. Trump is poised to have the greatest electoral performance of any Republican since 1960. That's the headline you won't see. You'll only see Kamala Harris is doing poorly. One more poll. NBC News. This is the result of their current poll for the national popular vote. Now, of course, we don't pay attention to the national popular vote much here because it's meaningless. That's not how we elect presidents. We elect them state by state. But this is trouble for Democrats. You know, a Republican has not won the presidency with the national popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. And before that, the last one to do it was his dad in 1988. In other words, only 2 presidents since 1988, Republicans, have won the Electoral College and won the popular vote. Trump didn't do it when he won, and Bush didn't do it in 2000. Generally speaking, because California is so overloaded with Democrat votes, as is New York, as is Illinois, that even when a Republican does well in the Electoral College map, he's not going to win the national popular vote. That's why Democrats want to do away with the Electoral College, right? So when a Republican is tied or actually winning the national popular vote or the polls for the national popular vote, it is the biggest of all danger signs for Democrats. Look at where NBC has them right now. It's a dead heat 3 weeks out. And the trend is going in Trump's favor. More on this NBC poll, by the way. In the two-way race, yes, Trump has gained 4 points, and now it's tied 48-48. But look at the full field of all the candidates. When you add RFK Jr., who is still on the ballot in some states, and Jill Stein and this libertarian Oliver, he actually is beating Kamala Harris 47-46. Absolute devastation. Kamala Harris is in big, big trouble, my friends. And who's to blame for it? Well, just about an hour ago on The View, Sunny Hostin explained exactly who's to blame for Kamala Harris's performance. And I know you would probably think it's Kamala Harris. Maybe you would think it was Joe Biden's economic policies. Maybe you would think that it was the Democrats for making this entire campaign about Donald Trump instead of actually a positive message for American voters. You'd be wrong. No, Sunny Hostin knows who's really to blame for Kamala Harris doing so poorly.
Look, I think that Kamala Harris has been running a flawless campaign, and that's why she raised billions of dollars, $1 billion. I think it's because of the momentum that she has. I think it's because people believe in her, and I think people are showing that by the amount of money that they're willing to give to the campaign. I think we have the press to blame for a lot of this. About, you know, Whoopi, you always say you don't believe in polls. I'm with you now, because I'm reading the press. First it was, Kamala's not doing enough press. Then she goes on this huge press tour. She was here with us. I thought she was fantastic. She was energetic. The crowd went wild. It was electric. CNN, Democrats go anxious. Axios, blue wall blues. Fox, Dems are scared to death. No, Dems are not scared to death. Dems are pumped. What I would like the press to talk a little bit more about is Trump is in hiding. He didn't do the 60 Minutes interview. He does not want to do another debate. He's in mental decline. Obama's speech was captivating in Pittsburgh, yet instead of talking about that, we're talking about what he said before the speech to black men. I think that the media has to do a much better job than what they're doing.
Yeah, you heard it right. The reason why Kamala Harris is doing so poorly is because of the mainstream media and their anti-Democrat, anti-Kamala Harris bias. They're in the tank for Trump. I wish I could make this up. I wish I could make this up. And what they really should be thinking about and talking about is how Trump's in hiding. Trump does a rally every other day. Trump sits and does a podcast for 3 hours straight and answers every question that's put to him. He didn't do 60 Minutes. Why? Because we just found out that 60 Minutes deceptively edited their interview with Kamala to make her look less imbecilic and moronic. I mean, he'd be a fool if he said that was 60 Minutes or any other media outlet. But no, Donald Trump is in hiding. This is glorious. Are you not having a great day? This is a great thing to behold and witness, but we're not complacent. We're not confident even. We're hopeful. We're optimistic, but we are focused like a freaking laser beam. And we're going to stick together, shoulder to shoulder, holding hands if we have to, because we will not break this wall. And we're going to march straight forward from today for the next 21 days, right up to Election Day. And we will be in it together, including our live election night coverage that you'll see right here that night, a special downtown DC park-like atmosphere for this special program that you contribute to so greatly. We thank you so much for watching today. Thank you. It's been a great one. Have a great Columbus Day. Enjoy yourself. Kevin, do we have more super chats here that popped through?
Yes, we do. Please hold.
Let's do it. Ellen Collins with $25. Thank you so much for that super chat. And I love your dog, Ellen. That's a great looking dog. Little Tubby. Might need to get that dog on the treadmill. But maybe chasing squirrels would be a good way. But I love that dog. Thank you very much, Ellen. And we're going to keep up the good work. Dennis Harmon with a 2 for today. Dude, thank you. We are not going to stop. They can't stop us. The big tech's going to have to rip us off the air to try to stop us. And even then, we'll figure out a way. Thank you, Dennis. God bless you, man. Susan Cummings. Thank you so much, Susan. Show Larry some love. Hit the like button. Great work. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan. That is so kind of you. And yes, we do appreciate all the likes. Let's go. And Elliot Barry, thank you for the sawbuck. Nobody breaks it down like you, Larry. I hope not. I got to keep my job. Lamestream Media out in left field without a glove. Thanks for all you do, brother. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Fist bump right back at you. All right, Kevin, you enjoy your Columbus Day. What are you going to do? You're going to like eat some maize and smoke them your peace pipe in a wigwam? What are you going to do?
It might involve some tobacco of some sort.
Nice. Me too. Me too. Excellent. That's the only way to celebrate. And eat some Italian food. I'm going for some Italian food because Christopher Columbus is a stud, and none of us would be here without him. Thanks for watching today. We'll be back tomorrow. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.